title, isn't it? You've got no idea how hard it is to have got here today. I woke up in Manchester this morning, very confused, fog. I'm going to talk to you today about the need for brands to be as brave as possible, and making sure that my own picture, of my own face up there. That's freaky. And actually, just to make sure, just in case that you already feel bored, there's my entire presentation. Feel free to switch off. It's fine. It's okay. There's a bit where I'm mildly funny, a slightly ironic bit, a bit that you won't like, and a really resonant point at the end. The thing about branding, and I'm from Wolff Olins, and Wolff Olins is essentially a brand agency. The thing about branding is that brands, by their very nature, want to come back to something that is essentially quite boring. All brands start off with a fantastic ambition to change the world, but over time they gradually want to kind of drift back to something that actually is a little bit safe, a little bit familiar, and a little bit secure. And part of the job of creativity is to constantly push and innovate and change and make sure that as a creative industry, we are constantly moving and pushing people beyond their boundaries. I'll explain this in a minute. I'm not on day release or anything. We have never been in a time whereby you could be any more creative. This is an example from No Man's Sky, and I apologize for stealing it off the internet, but I'm absolutely fascinated with this game. The idea that these endless worlds that are created by procedural graphics. The idea that you can essentially travel for years and years and years and not meet anybody on these constantly evolving, constantly creating, constantly developing environments. We're in an amazing time, an amazing space whereby, things are really quite fragmented, and there's lots of different platforms and lots of different sources of receiving information. But the opportunity to be creative has never been bigger than ever. The slight paradox with that is that actually people have started to be a little bit safe. Part of my job is to look at portfolios that come through our door. And I've noticed over the last few years that despite all these opportunities, we're starting to see very similar presentations. Everybody coming out of college is super polished and fantastically kind of able, but they've had all their kind of soft edges knocked off, and they kind of present things that feel slightly familiar. Google material design is absolutely fantastic for Google, but when you see it for a 16th time and it's been recreated, it's kind of lost some of its charm. I'm also really guilty of falling back on things that are familiar, things that I perhaps have used time and time again because they work for me. Here's a list of safe words. Big data, perpetual beta, skin in the game, been known to use that one. Crowdsourcing, authorship, customer centricity, the Internet of Things. You'll hear lots of these words throughout the coming days, and they're all fantastic because they all explain things that are helping change the way that we approach creativity. But in the spirit of trying to not be too familiar, I'm going to keep pushing. So every time I mention one of these, I'm going to give myself a very small electric shock with this device, hence the little... It does actually hurt as well. And actually, surprisingly, really easy to get through customs. Not a problem at all. The reason why I'm worried about this kind of idea of getting boring is I'm getting older. I'm 37 years old. If I was a pop star of any considerable note, I'd have been dead 10 years. If I was a professional footballer, I'd either be on Sky Sports or I'd be really getting stuck into an alcohol problem. The image there is from Logan's Run, and Logan's Run had a really interesting principle to deal with that, whereby it took anybody over the age of 30 and took them to a dark room and dispatched them. And for many years, I thought that that was the secret to keeping creativity fresh. There should be no old CDs. Nobody listens to old CDs. You'd be surprised to know that I'm slightly more skeptical about that now at the age of 37. And partly, that's because I work in a place that is incredibly innovative and interesting and constantly tries to push the boundaries. You could say that the way in which we work is responsive, it's agile, it's kind of adaptive. But in many respects, it's actually, and unlike Logan's Run, it's more like David Bowie. We're constantly kind of changing our roles. We're constantly changing what we do. More to that, though, more than being agile and flexible, is that we do that in a way that's kind of got a real naive spirit to it. And I think part of keeping creative and not being boring is making sure that you keep that kind of fun spirit of enjoying what you do. It's not rocket science, isn't branding or design. It should be fun and it should be really involved. There's a little short video here to show you what working at our place is a little bit like. If it'll play. Oh. Can I go back? No? Play that? Apparently not, no. If you've ever imagined what working at Wolff Olins is like, keep wondering. It's great, you loved it. Another buzzword that I've used many, many times is Standout. And if you had seen that video, and it was fantastic, one of the things that we constantly try to do is aim to make brands that stand out in the world, brands that kind of hit you between the eyes. The other thing that we've really learned as well, though, is that it's not just about the standout. In a world where you've got multiple devices, the idea that a color or a Pantone number can help you stand out among the crowd is kind of a little bit outdated. Actually, it's just as much about what you stand for. It's about hitting people there just as much as it is between the eyes. London 2012 was a brand that we're pretty well known for lots of reasons. The thing that I really liked about that was that it wasn't just about that mark. There was a lot of attention drawn to the mark, but actually it was about what it stood for. And the idea of the Games was very much about being everybody's Olympic and everybody able to have access and be able to kind of come and from off the podium and into the streets. And really the kind of charm and the way that the creativity kind of really resonated for me was the fact that it wasn't about the mark, it was about the fact that it was embedded in everything that people did. So the fact that there's no logo on that particular shot there, but you can tell from even just looking at that typeface what year those games were. Another buzzword is customer-centric. Customer-centric's a great one, because everything we do, we believe is customer-centric. And it's true, and it's very, very important. You should base everything around what your customer is looking for and what the customer is kind of after. But actually, if you really boil it down, it's about being people-centric. It's about looking at individuals and how human beings really react and behave. We've worked with Virgin Media for a number of years now. Interesting brand with a great kind of heritage. I think it was always a challenge to make sure they could continue to push that and continue to engage with people in that kind of warm way that touches people's hearts. That's a shot there from the V Festival. I don't know if you've ever been to a V Festival, it's frightening. But what we did there was, instead of just plastering the place with kind of posters to tell people to buy stuff, we gave them all these little individual sets of glasses and actually split the crowd. So half the crowd got blue ones and half the crowd got red ones. And depending on which ones you had a slightly different experience with those huge big screens that were up on the walls. See if this one plays. Oh, it's going to be sad if there's no videos. No? One of the things that was asked of us from Reg Fripp on one of the little comments on Design Week when this brand was launched was, isn't this just the same as the old logo but drawn by a 9-year-old? It's a bit harsh, Reg Fripp. I noticed he posted it at midnight as well, which obviously worrying about branding at midnight. Actually, the best thing about it was, and if this moved, you'd be able to see, but the best thing about it was it could be drawn by a 9-year-old. That was what made it really smart and interesting. It could be drawn by a 99-year-old. It could appeal to a wide range of people. And even this bloke managed to draw it as well. You could say that that was essentially crowdsourced. And crowdsourcing is great. It can be really practical in terms of bringing out lots of different ideas. But actually, we prefer the idea that it's about being team built. It's not just a case of going for the volume. It's about actually the edit. And some of the most interesting work comes from that friction and the kind of way in which a team sits together and works together. And that's what's incredibly important about the way in which we work. It's about how we interact as a group and how we interact with the rest of the world. And that takes us to our kind of final shift, I suppose, which is a shift from being authors to contributors. I think more and more we're finding that the best way to make the most creative work, the way in which we can make work which is not just kind of interesting and innovative, but it actually really engages people, is by going out and actually speaking to people and engaging with them. The example here, and it's a shame that this video won't run, but I'll tell you the story about it, is we worked with an artist called Wolff Olins. Wolff Olins worked to create the huge, big sun in the Tate. It's a fantastic, we also worked and created the Tate, but it's a fantastic way of bringing people together. Some of you may have been. He was working with a charity that was helping people in Africa. One of the biggest problems is ability to access light, incredibly dark at night, incredibly dangerous at night, and to be able to access light that is safe and not using kerosene lamps or using things that are potentially dangerous. And being able to do that in a way that's kind of replicable was really important. And what they did was created alongside us a brand called Little Sun. And Little Sun is a solar-powered kind of little light. And that had two roles. One, it was able to be sold in the Tate as a piece of artwork, which was fantastic for one group of people and engage people on a certain level. But then the very same piece of material was able to be taken to Africa and used as a practical tool, used as something that then could be used by kids, used by older people at night when they need to leave the house. So it played those two roles. And what was really smart and is shown in the video is it really came to life when the brand was let go. And I think that's the thing that we always try to do, is find a way to put the brand out in the world, but then let people run with it. It can't be, if it's designed really, really well, if it's really, really creative, then it can't ever be broken. And there's some fantastic examples of people creating their own stores or creating their own little mini markets and using the products, but also using the identity in a way that was unique to them and unique and special. And it was just a really, really fantastic example of taking a brand and kind of releasing it out into the world. Because my videos haven't played, I've got kind of 10 minutes left, so I will cut short rather than stand here and bore you for another 10 minutes. There's some of the nice shots from a Little Sun video, which is really sweet. They currently, at the moment, just to give them a plug, they're working to create the next step of this, which is to create mobile phone chargers. The way the mobile phone has influenced Africa is absolutely huge. It's essentially the way in which you contact people, but it's also your form of finance. It's also the way in which you can transport things, even like medicine. So that's now their main focus. So that's it. It took a long time to get here. Not everything worked. But I think if you take one thing away, the world will always try to come back to being a little bit dull, being a little bit safe, being a little bit bored. Just constantly keep pushing it a little bit further. Just try something you haven't tried before. Even if you risk looking like a bit of a knob, it's probably going to be worthwhile. Okay.